I never thought the worst moment of my life would happen at my son's wedding. You know how you plan for everything. The flowers, the seating chart, the photographer angles. I spent months making sure Dylan's day would be perfect. 28 years of marriage, and I thought I'd finally made it to the other side, the part where you get to celebrate what you built together. Where you look across the table at your husband and think, asterisk, we did this. We raised this beautiful human being, asterisk. But that's not what happened. If you've ever felt your entire world collapse in a single sentence, stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you is something I never thought I'd say out loud. And if you're watching this right now, whether you're in New York, Texas, somewhere overseas, leave a comment and let me know where you're from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And please, check the description box below for more stories like mine. Sometimes just knowing someone else survived their worst day makes all the difference. My name is Caroline. I'm 43 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a good life. Not perfect, but good. My husband, Richard, was a commercial real estate broker. Successful. Charming when he wanted to be. We lived in a renovated colonial in suburban Connecticut, the kind with the wraparound porch and the garden I actually maintained. Our son Dylan was getting married to Emma, a sweet paralegal who made him laugh in ways I hadn't seen since he was a kid. The rehearsal dinner was at the Greystone Inn, this elegant old estate with chandeliers and string lights wrapped around the oak trees outside. Everything looked like a fairy tale. I wore a deep emerald dress Richard had complimented that morning. He'd kissed my cheek while adjusting his cufflinks and said, "You look beautiful, Caroline." I remember thinking, maybe we're finally okay again, because things had been off. Distant. He worked late more often. Stopped asking about my day. But I told myself it was stress. Work. Midlife stuff. I told myself a lot of things. Dinner was perfect at first. Dylan gave a toast that made me cry. Emma's father told a joke that made everyone laugh. I felt Richard's hand on my knee under the table, and for a second, I thought we're going to be fine. Then he stood up. It wasn't planned. No one was expecting him to speak. But Richard pushed his chair back, cleared his throat, and picked up his glass. Everyone went quiet, expecting something sweet. Something about Dylan. Something about family. Instead, he looked directly at me and said, "I can't do this anymore." I blinked, confused. I thought he meant the speech. Maybe he was nervous. But then he kept going. "I've met someone else." The room didn't just go silent. It froze, like someone had hit pause on a movie. Forks hovered midair. Mouths hung open. Dylan's face drained of color. Emma grabbed his hand like she was trying to anchor him to the earth. And I just stared at him. Because this wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then Richard gestured across the table. "Vivian and I have been seeing each other for over a year." My eyes followed his hand. Vivian. She was sitting right there. Across from me. A woman I'd met 3 times, maybe 4. Blonde. Younger than me by at least a decade. She worked in his office. I'd even made small talk with her at a company holiday party last December. She'd smiled at me, told me my scarf was pretty, and now she was staring down at her lap, her fingers twisted together, her face flushed but not quite ashamed. Just uncomfortable. Like she wished she were anywhere else but here. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember hearing the gasps or the whispers starting to ripple through the room. All I could feel was this strange, cold clarity settling over me like frost. I looked at Richard. He looked at me. And for the first time in 28 years, I realized I didn't know the man standing in front of me. I could have screamed. I could have thrown my glass. I could have collapsed into the kind of sobbing mess you see in movies. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small, quiet one. The kind you give when you just figured out the punchline to a joke no one else has caught yet. I reached into my purse, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a manila envelope. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. And somehow, impossibly, this was it. I slid it across the table toward Richard. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, my voice steady, almost polite. "I think you'll want to read this." He stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Then he opened it. I watched his face change, watched the color drain, watched his jaw tighten and his hand start to shake. Because inside that envelope were copies of bank statements, text messages, photos, emails, everything. Everything he thought I didn't know. Everything he thought he'd hidden. And there was more. So much more. But before I could say another word, Dylan shot to his feet. Dad, what the hell is wrong with you? Emma was crying. Someone had started praying. Vivian finally looked up, her eyes wide, panicked, like she was realizing this wasn't going to go the way she thought. Richard looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it, fear. Because he knew. In that moment, he knew I wasn't the woman he thought he married. I wasn't the quiet, accommodating Caroline who let things slide, who forgave, who smiled through the pain. I was something else now. And I was just getting started. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It's not like in the movies where the music swells and you collapse into someone's arms. No. It seeps in slowly. First, it's disbelief. Then it's anger. Then it's this hollow, aching sadness that makes you question every single moment of your life. But somewhere beneath all of that, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, there's clarity. And clarity, I learned, is a weapon. Let me back up, because you're probably wondering how I ended up at my son's wedding with a revenge file in my purse. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something was wrong but couldn't quite prove it, you'll understand what I'm about to say. And if you're still with me, please, hit that subscribe button. I promise you, this story is going somewhere you won't see coming. Check the description for more stories like this one. You're not alone. None of us are. It started 4 months before the wedding. Richard had been working late again. 3rd time that week. I texted him around 9, asking when he'd be home. He replied, *big client meeting. Don't wait up, *. Except I wasn't tired. So I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and opened his laptop. I wasn't snooping. Not really. I just wanted to look at the photos from our trip to Maine the summer before. We'd had a good weekend that trip. I wanted to remember what that felt like. But when I opened his photo library, I saw something else. A folder labeled V. I didn't want to click it. Some part of me knew that once I did, I couldn't unsee it. But my hand moved anyway. And there they were. Photos of Richard and Vivian. At a restaurant I didn't recognize. At a beach house I'd never been to. In bed. My stomach turned. My hands went cold. I sat there staring at the screen, and all I could think was, how long? I scrolled. And scrolled. There were dozens of photos. Months' worth. Text messages too if I dug deeper. I didn't that night. I closed the laptop, set it back on the coffee table, and sat in the dark for 3 hours until Richard came home. He kissed the top of my head. You're still up. I smiled. Couldn't sleep. He didn't notice my hands were shaking. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to ask him why, or try to fix something that was clearly broken beyond repair. I was going to be smart. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney named Margaret Chin. She was ruthless, brilliant, and she didn't waste time on sympathy. I liked her immediately. Do you want alimony, or do you want to destroy him? She asked. Both, I said. She smiled. Then we have work to do. Over the next 3 months, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired a private investigator named Tom Ramirez, a former cop with a salt and pepper beard and a voice like gravel. He found everything. Vivian's apartment lease, which Richard was paying for. Joint credit cards I didn't know existed. A second phone Richard kept in his gym bag. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the money. Richard had been siphoning funds from our joint account for over a year. Small amounts at first. Then bigger chunks. He'd opened a separate account under his mother's name. She passed away 5 years ago, so he thought no one would notice, and funneled over $180,000 into it. Our retirement. Dylan's college fund that we'd promised to help with if he ever wanted to go back for his master's. Money I'd earned, too, from years of freelance consulting work I did from home. Gone. Or at least, he thought it was gone. But here's the thing about underestimating someone. It gives them power. Margaret and I built a case. Not just for divorce. For fraud. For asset concealment. For breach of fiduciary duty. I didn't just want to leave Richard. I wanted to make sure he understood what he'd done. What he'd thrown away. And I wanted Vivian to know too. Because she wasn't innocent. She knew he was married. She'd smiled at me at that Christmas party. She'd probably laughed about it later. So when Dylan called to tell me about the wedding, his voice so full of joy it almost broke me. I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to ruin Dylan's wedding, but I wasn't going to let Richard walk away clean either. I spent weeks rehearsing what I'd say if he tried to make a scene. I didn't expect him to actually do it, but when he stood up and made his little announcement, when he gestured to Vivian like she was some kind of prize he'd won, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not sadness, peace, because I'd already won. The envelope I handed him contained copies of everything. The bank records, the receipts, the text messages where he and Vivian joked about me, called me the warden, said I was clueless. There were also legal documents, divorce papers, already filed, a restraining order against any joint accounts, and a letter from Margaret outlining exactly how much he was going to lose. The house, half his business, his reputation, everything. Richard's hands were still shaking when Dylan grabbed the papers from him. My son read the first page and his face went white, then red. Then he looked at his father like he was looking at a stranger. "You stole from us." Richard opened his mouth, closed it. He had no defense. Vivian finally stood up. "I think I should go." "Yeah?" I said, my voice calm, almost kind. "I think you should." She left, and the room erupted, but I just sat there, smiling, sipping my wine, because this was only the beginning. You'd think that moment, the one where everything came crashing down in front of 50 people, would be the end of it. It wasn't. If anything, it was just the intermission. Because here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It doesn't feel as good as you think it will. At least not right away. At first, it just feels empty. Like you've screamed into a void and you're waiting for the echo to come back and tell you that you did the right thing. I spent the rest of that night at the hotel bar. Not drinking. Just sitting. Watching the wedding guests trickle past, some of them giving me sympathetic looks, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Dylan and Emma had gone upstairs. My son didn't say a word to me before he left, and I didn't blame him. His wedding had just imploded. His father had humiliated him. And I turned it into a courtroom. Maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have waited until after the weekend, pulled Richard aside privately, kept Dylan out of it. But you know what? I was tired of keeping things private. Tired of protecting a man who didn't protect me. Tired of pretending everything was fine when it hadn't been fine for a very long time. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself, you know how impossible that choice feels. And if you're still here with me, thank you. Truly. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have waited? I'd love to know. And don't forget to check the description box for more stories like this. Sometimes we need reminders that we're not the villain for refusing to be quiet. Around midnight, Margaret called. "I saw the news," she said. Not the actual news, just the family group chat that had apparently exploded after the dinner. And you're either a genius or completely insane. I haven't decided yet. I laughed. It felt strange. Maybe both. Well, either way, Richard's attorney called me an hour ago. He wants to settle. I sat up straighter. Already? Apparently your little stunt tonight scared him. He knows this is going public. He knows what that'll do to his business. So yeah, he wants to settle. Fast. Good, I said. Let him sweat. We talked for another 20 minutes. Margaret laid out the terms. Richard would keep a small portion of his business equity. I'd get the house, the car, and 70% of our liquid assets. He'd also have to pay back the $180,000 he'd hidden, plus interest, plus my legal fees. It was more than fair. It was justice. But it still felt hollow. I hung up and stared at my phone. There were 37 missed calls. Texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Distant cousins. Old coworkers. Everyone wanted the story. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay. But the one person I wanted to hear from hadn't called at all. Dylan. I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't. I kept replaying the look on his face when he'd read those papers. The betrayal. The confusion. The anger. Not just at Richard, but at me too. Because I'd known. I'd known for months, and I hadn't told him. How could I explain that? How could I tell my son that I didn't want to burden him before the happiest day of his life? That I was trying to protect him, even though it didn't feel like protection anymore? The next morning, I knocked on Dylan's hotel room door. Emma answered. Her eyes were red. Is he here? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded and stepped aside. Dylan was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his dress shirt from the night before, wrinkled and untucked. He looked up at me, and I saw it, the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after a nightmare. The teenager who'd asked me, voice shaking, if his dad and I were going to get divorced after a bad fight. The young man who'd called me crying when his college girlfriend broke his heart. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I sat down next to him. Because I didn't want to ruin this for you. You think last night didn't ruin it? I flinched. He was right. Of course he was right. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't know he was going to do that. I thought he'd have the decency to wait. To not make it about him on your day. Dylan shook his head. He's never had decency, Mom. Not really. I just didn't want to see it. We sat there in silence. Emma brought us coffee. I held the cup but didn't drink it. I don't blame you, Dylan said finally. I mean, I'm pissed. But not at you. Not really. I nodded. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I just wish things were different, he said. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We stayed like that for a while. Then Emma sat down on his other side and took his hand, and I realized this was his family now. She was his person, and I was so grateful he had her. I left the hotel that afternoon and drove back to Connecticut. The house felt enormous and empty. I walked through the rooms Richard and I had decorated together. The kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday dinners. The living room where we'd watched Dylan grow up. It didn't feel like mine anymore. But it would, soon. A week later, Richard signed the settlement. He didn't fight. Didn't argue. He just gave up. Maybe he realized he'd lost the moment he stood up at that dinner. Maybe Vivian had already left him. Tom told me later that she'd moved out of the apartment Richard had been paying for. Apparently, being the other woman isn't as glamorous when it stops being a secret. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. But there was still one more thing I needed to do. 3 months after the wedding, I sold the house. I know. You're probably thinking, Caroline, you fought for that house. Why would you leave it? And you're right. I did fight for it. But once I had it, once Richard's name was off the deed and the locks were changed and the rooms were mine again, I realized something. I didn't want it. Every corner of that house was a memory I didn't want to keep. The kitchen where Richard used to kiss me good morning before everything fell apart. The bedroom where I'd lie awake at night wondering when he stopped loving me. The front porch where we took Dylan's prom photos, both of us smiling like we had it all figured out. I didn't want to live in a museum of a life I'd lost. So I sold it. Got a good price, too. Then I bought a small condo in Portland, Maine. You remember that trip I mentioned? The one where Richard and I had a good weekend? Turns out I love that town. The ocean. The quiet. The little coffee shop on the corner where nobody knew my name or my story. I could breathe there. Dylan and Emma visited me last month. We walked along the waterfront and ate lobster rolls and didn't talk about Richard at all. It felt good. It felt like maybe we were going to be okay. Like maybe the three of us could build something new out of the wreckage of what came before. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything is perfect now. It's not. Some days are still hard. Some days I wake up angry all over again. Angry at Richard for throwing away 28 years like they meant nothing. Angry at Vivian for being complicit. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But most days, I wake up and I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Free. Here's what I learned from all of this. And if you've stuck with me through this whole story, I hope you'll hear me out on this part. Because it's important. Revenge doesn't fix you. It doesn't erase the betrayal or undo the damage. It doesn't make you stop loving someone, even when you know you should. But it does give you your power back. For so long, I was the woman who accommodated, who smoothed things over, who made excuses for Richard when he missed Dylan's soccer games or forgot our anniversary or worked late for the 100th time. I told myself I was being a good wife, a supportive partner, but really I was disappearing. And that night at the wedding, when I handed Richard that envelope, I stopped disappearing. I stopped being the woman who stayed quiet while someone else controlled the narrative. I became the woman who told the truth, even when it was ugly, even when it hurt people I loved, even when it meant losing the life I thought I wanted. Because here's the thing, you can't build a real life on lies. You can't love someone who doesn't respect you. And you can't keep sacrificing yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. I know some of you watching this are probably in similar situations. Maybe not exactly the same, but close enough. Maybe you've been cheated on. Maybe you've been lied to. Maybe you're sitting there right now wondering if you should stay or if you should go. Wondering if confronting someone will make things better or worse. Wondering if you're strong enough to walk away. Let me tell you something, you are. You are strong enough. You are brave enough. And you deserve better than someone who treats you like an option. It won't be easy. It's going to hurt. There are going to be days when you question everything. Days when you wonder if you made the right choice. Days when you miss the person you thought they were, even though you know that person never really existed. But you'll survive it. I promise you that. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're actually living. I still think about that night sometimes. The look on Richard's face when he opened the envelope. The way the room went silent. The way Dylan looked at both of us like we were strangers. But you know what I think about more? The moment I left that hotel and got in my car and drove away. The way my hand stopped shaking. The way my breathing slowed. The way I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and saw someone I recognized again. Not the woman I was before. Someone new. Someone harder, maybe. But also someone who wouldn't let herself be erased ever again. Richard called me once, about 2 months after the settlement. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Caroline," he said, his voice tired. "I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I know it doesn't change anything. I know I can't take it back. But I need you to know I'm sorry. For all of it." I took a breath. "Okay. That's it? Just okay. What do you want me to say, Richard? That I forgive you? That it's all water under the bridge? I don't know. Maybe." I laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Just a sad one. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. But it's not with me. It's never going to be with me again." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I know. We haven't spoken since. I don't know where Richard is now. I don't know if he's still with Vivian, or if she left him the way I knew she eventually would. I don't know if he regrets what he did, or if he's convinced himself he was the victim somehow. And honestly, I don't care. Because my story isn't about him anymore. It's about me. It's about the woman who stood up at her son's wedding and refused to be humiliated in silence. The woman who fought for what was hers and didn't apologize for it. The woman who walked away from a life that was killing her, even though it meant starting over from scratch. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story if you're brave enough. And check the description box for more stories like this one, because we all need reminders that we're not alone in this. Life is short. Too short to spend it with people who don't see your worth. Too short to stay small, so someone else can feel big. Be loud. Be brave. Be the woman, or man, who tells the truth, even when it's terrifying. And if someone tries to write you out of your own story, take the pen back. That's what I did, and I've never looked back.